Evening, everyone. My name is Tatiana Deravidisyan, and I am Chair of Trustees of the Armenian Institute, the leading Armenian arts and cultural organization in the UK. The Armenian Institute is all about making Armenian culture and history a living experience. And tonight we have the pleasure of hosting Irina Zorabian, the Executive Director of Armenian Volunteer Corps in Armenia, along with one of their fellow alumni, Rod Gregg. Armenian Volunteer Corps, AVC, is the brainchild of a former Peace Corps volunteer who served in Armenia for 2 years. After falling in love with long-term community service and with Armenia, he set out to create an independent organization that would make volunteering in Armenia possible, all through affordable, safe, and fulfilling service projects. Since 2001, they have welcomed over 1,000 global volunteers, and their volunteers hail from all parts of the world. Tonight, we will hear from them about the work that AVC does and how you can get involved. Welcome, Irina.
Actually born in London. So I'm very excited to be with everyone, and Rod, to also see you, and a major thank you to our organizers who gave us this opportunity. So, Tatiana, you did a great job with the introduction. ABC was founded based on a single person's experience. Doing 2 years of service in Armenia as a diasporan gave him such a deep experience with the country and such a connection that he wanted to create similar opportunities for other diasporans. And so the Armenian Volunteer Corps was born with the tagline, "Come Move Mountains." We have this wonderful alum, Antoine Terjanyan, who says, well, how do you move mountains? And his response is one pebble at a time. We have actually now brought more than 1,300 volunteers. So Tatiana, that data was not updated that we gave you, so sorry about that. And each and every single one has done some major impact. And you'll hear from Rod later on today about what his impact was. And if he's modest as he always is, then I'll make sure to add on to the things that he has done. A little bit about ABC. We are essentially the premier internship and volunteer placement organization, and we are co-located with Birthright Armenia, our sister organization that does basically the same thing, but for diasporan Armenians between the ages of 21 to 32. ABC's focus is on a junior course, so non-Armenians age 21 plus, but really focusing on bringing a professional core, which includes non-Armenians as well as diasporans 32 plus. And we feel like some of the greatest impact can be achieved through people like Rod, who are, I think he's 40, but I'm going to say 60 plus for senior core, where they have a lot more time and a lot more ability and a lot more patience to really bring in a lot of change to the country. So that's a little bit about the different programs we offer. It is really a life-changing experience. I came for what was meant to be a 1-year program, and I've been here for the past 22 years. And it's getting a little bit more sort of interesting and ironic to interview a lot of applicants, because they'll say, well, I was born in 2003. And I was like, damn, I moved to Armenia before you actually were born. So it is really the people that come to Armenia. Not only do they give, but they also learn a lot from the experience, and they take a lot from that experience. In terms of what is required of volunteers, for our junior corps, it's 30 hours a week, but for the professional corps and for the senior corps, it's 20 hours per week of volunteering. But it's also an opportunity to uniquely discover different parts of the country. And hopefully Rod, during his talk, will talk about the really fun excursions that's with all of the other ABC and Birthright volunteers that you're able to join each and every single Saturday. There's immersion into the local life. You have the opportunity to live in very affordable and authentic Armenian homes through homestays, which, when I stayed with a host family when I first started, but it's a very different experience when you come a little bit older and you want to re-experience how people live, because it really gives you a very different look into how most people in Armenia live. And we've had many of our senior volunteers and many of our professional volunteers choose to stay with homestays, and it has been typically a phenomenal experience. There's a little issue with privacy because Armenian moms just tend to adopt anyone that comes into their homes. So that can be a little bit suffocating at times, but usually it's always a positive suffocation if there is such a thing. And the program also allows you to learn the Armenian language twice a week through free Armenian language classes. So there's also that. Eligibility. So, for whoever has joined, I sort of already mentioned this. The Junior Corps is for the non-Armenians 21 to 31. Pro Corps is any Diasporan 32 plus, and Senior Corps is 60 plus. Our minimum time commitment is 1 month. And we typically, all the way up to a year. We do have shorter durations for the Professional Corps and Senior Corps of up to 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. With a required donation. But I will tell you from my experience, absolutely every single volunteer who's come through and has not spent more than a couple of months has always regretted not spending more time. And I was reviewing a lot of Rod's documents before this call. And in his exit survey, he said the one thing he wishes he had done was have more time. So, for any of you who ultimately decide to commit and come to Armenia to volunteer, if you decide to do a short stint, I'll remind you of this conversation and that, you probably would have wanted to be here a little bit longer. The support services that we provide, we are full support. So when you come here, you get everything from an airport pickup upon arrival. We have the option to stay with affordable host families, which is, unfortunately after what happened with Russia and Ukraine, costs in Armenia completely skyrocketed. So that's a great means of living much more affordably. And then we have language classes twice a week. We offer really good health insurance, which I used to always actually make fun of it, saying it was like American health insurance, but we've had a spout of incidents where volunteers have actually needed to use it. And when they've used it correctly, it's pretty much covered everything. We have a co-working space for all of the offices we have, both in Yerevan as well as in Gyumri. And we're slowly making our Vanadzor office a full-time, full-year office as well. The excursions that I spoke about, we also do forums, and we also do havaks, or what we call gatherings, which are essentially informational sessions to help you better understand the country. Once you're done, there's this great expression in Armenian, Mezanits bërtsum chka, there is never an end to us. So once you join, you also join the alumni family once you're done, and you always have the ability to, re-engage as a volunteer or just come back as an alum and take advantage of all of these different services that we provide. And then we do a lot of community service projects, at least 6 to 10 a year, where working with our partner organizations, we try to support, certain projects that we think will be beneficial to the community. The next one we have coming up is an event we do with one of our Toronto-based volunteers who keeps coming back, where he will be throwing a Christmas holiday for 200 children who were displaced from Artsakh. What else do we have? So the bread and butter of what we do. So what we do best is the customized placements. So everyone who applies and comes through ABC does do an application. And through that application, we then do a one-on-one interview where we try to find out and say, okay, well, what is your skill set? What is your experience? What are your interests? And based on all of that, we will then work on identifying potential partnerships, collaborations, volunteer experiences, internships within the more than 1,400 organizations we serve in Armenia. Let's assume, in the off chance that you guys are interested in a specific organization that's not a partner, also okay. We're really good at sort of contacting people and converting them and saying, we have this great volunteer coming, they'd be really interested, and is that something that is that someone you would like to host? So this is, I think, a part of the program we do really, really well, but we also tweak it. So let's say you come at the beginning, and Rod will speak a lot more in detail about this. But when you come at the beginning, you sort of have an idea, and then there's about a week of onboarding. And after that, you really are able to hit the ground running and do some good impact. And this previous month, we just launched a mentorship program. So one of the placements we offer to each and every single volunteer is to work with children of regions in Armenia and establish one-on-one mentor-mentee relationships to help, give a little bit more of a world's view to some of these children. But I will tell you, they probably are going to teach you as much, if not more, than what you're going to be able to teach them. So just to run through, since 2021, we've welcomed 14 volunteers from the United Kingdom. Rod, and we have one current woman who's not at all diasporan, who joined our Senior Corps, 3 women from the Professional Corps, and we've had 9 people joining our Junior Corps. Many of the Junior Corps volunteers have been people who are either students at LSE or at Oxford. So, very accomplished students who come here to do their internship requirements, meet their internship requirements. And then the seniors who join us really have this immense amount of knowledge that they come and we're able to customize and allow them to, share part of that with some of our partner organizations. And all of the photos are of some of those British volunteers. What else do I have? So Rod, I'm actually going to have him tell his story. But this is Chantel Davies from the UK, not Armenian. And she, as someone who was very, very interested in Armenian history, Armenian museums, Armenian language, Armenian literature, her placements ultimately ended up being the 3 that you see on your screen. ABC was a great one because she helped us develop a lot of guides to help improve the volunteer experience. And upon returning, she's like, I wish I had more time, but she's continuing to support the Matenadaran remotely. So it really created this great connection for her that, she hopes will last much longer than, the month that she was here with us. So for the alumni, I mentioned it very briefly, but, every time you want to come back, you're allowed to, you're able to volunteer once a year. We also provide a lot of support in networking, looking for jobs, and integrating with the country. So when I moved to Armenia in 2002, I was meant to volunteer for 1 year. After 1 year, I said, you know what, I'm not ready to leave. And I basically transitioned my life from, being born in the UK, raised in Iran, then moving to the US, then studying in Canada, then moving to Spain, then ultimately settling down here in Armenia after what was just what was meant to be a 1-year volunteer experience. There's a lot of individual support from the entire team. I recently had a volunteer who was hit by a car. He's fine. My host family did that to me. The host mom called me and was like, Pierre has been hit by a car. And then she gave it like a 2-minute awkward pause. And I'm, as an Armenian mother, sort of like my heart stopping, like, oh my God, what happened? And then 2 minutes later, she's like, but he's fine. So we went to the hospital. We were working with the police and making sure that everything was handled. So when I say a lot of support, it's not an overstatement. We're really there for all of our volunteers. And then continued access each and every time you come back to Armenia to not only our space, to all of the activities, including like the language classes, the excursions, and things like that. So this site right here is our website, and there's a lot of great stories on the blog section. Rod is also featured there. We also have a great FAQs that might answer your questions. My email address is also listed, arena@abc.am. If you're interested in getting an email from us with a lot more information about how to apply and things like that, feel free to direct message me in the Zoom chat your email address, and we'll make sure to message you sometime tomorrow. And then I talked very briefly about Birthright Armenia. So if you're here and either have like a sibling or a child who's at least 25% Armenian, they're eligible to apply for Birthright Armenia, which is essentially the same programming, but just meant for a younger audience. And they actually have financial incentives in place. ABC is fully self-financed, so the volunteers pay for everything, whereas with Birthright, there are some expenses that are covered by the program. And then these are QR codes to our LinkedIn and our Facebook page, which you can easily just find also doing a search. So I will stop with that. And then maybe ask, I think Rod will now take over, and then I will be happy to answer questions at the end. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you. And I'm gonna, yes, Rod, if you want to maybe share your story.
Yep, sure. So I hope I won't be repeating too much of what Marina said. I've put together a few slides just so you don't have to look at my face for the next 10 minutes. Kind of in the spirit of neighbours sharing their holiday snaps with you, I guess, but not as unwelcome, I hope. I'll show you if I can share my screen. And okay. So firstly then, I'm actually half Scot, half Armenian, but I have introduced myself in the past as Can you see me?
Yes, we can see the
Sorry,
slides now. Yeah.
I was just getting a message from Zoom saying Zoom quit unexpectedly. Slightly
No,
worried.
we can
It's
see you
not
and
the
hear you.
case. Okay, that's fine. So I keep getting the same message. Um, my experience was absolutely unique, and I think it's fair to say that whether you are 100% Armenian, whether you're hybrid like me, or whether you're Armenian by choice, so
Rod,
sorry,
Rod, we
Tatiana.
lost you for a second. We lost you for a second.
Okay. Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay. So I'm not sure how much of that you would have heard, but I'm just making the point that wherever you're coming from, with AVC, you would have a unique experience. And this is largely down to the fact that AVC will ensure that they will find placement or placements which suit you, which match you. And that was very much my experience. It's a kind of, I found the experience of filling in the form, the application form, quite challenging, but not in a bad way. Firstly, I had to find a curriculum via a CV, which I had something I hadn't done for ages. But so I think it's worth brushing your CVs if you are interested in joining. So I actually ended up with 4 placements, completely different from what I'd agreed before I got there, or rather largely different, I should say. So if I should mention at this stage that I'm rather like the example Arena gave a moment ago. Although I left Armenia in June, I'm still currently working with a couple of projects there. So with the History Museum in Yerevan, I'm still doing similar work to what I was doing before, but just remotely. And then I've taken on a new thing, which was not something that came to me via AVC, helping with an English school in Sevan. In fact, in the photograph, you can see next to the old man there, there's a young woman, Isabel, who's a German diasporan Armenian, who was doing birthright and helping to visit. This was the visit. And since then, I've been helping them, helping this little group of students prepare for the IELTS test, specifically with the speaking part of it. For my first 3 weekends in Armenia, I was working with the American University of Armenia on their extension program with these English speaking clubs. And I visited Goris, Kapan, Yekhanadzor. It was great opportunity to visit different parts of Armenia. And I would strongly advise anybody who goes, whether you're in Yerevan or Gyumri or wherever, please make sure you get out and go and visit other areas. It's an amazing experience. There's a slight negative to do with this particular placement, is that before I got there, I was asked, would I prefer to teach school-age children or adults? And someone assured me that the group size would be maximum 12. So when I arrived at Yekhanadzor, that first Saturday I was in Armenia, I was taken to one side and said, oh, by the way, these are all school children apart from one adult. Oh, and there are 16 of them. So if you do go to Armenia, flexibility is absolutely critical. In fact, one of the students turned out to be 11 years old. I did panic slightly, but once I started, I found that the students were so keen that it kind of didn't matter. The materials I prepared with adults in mind were adaptable. And I guess that's a message as well, if you do any preparation before you get there, be prepared for it to maybe need adapting. One thing that I found was an amazing asset here and elsewhere was having a British accent. The young people that I taught in these clubs, most of them had never seen face-to-face, spoken to somebody with a British accent. So that's something that's worth bearing in mind if you're thinking of taking part with AVC, and I hope you will. My next placement is interesting. I was expecting to be working at the National Art Gallery. When I got to Yerevan, to the AVC offices, apparently they couldn't place me, they couldn't find something for me. So in the same building, I was taken to the History Museum, and they were very keen. This is also interesting because I think history was probably my worst subject at school. And funnily enough, this turned into my favorite placement. I was working with the museum guides, but I wasn't trusted with actually doing any guiding. I was mainly involved in proofreading. It was quite an amazing experience. I'd arrive promptly every time I was supposed to be there at 11 a.m. But before I could start working, I'd had to have a cup of tea, coffee, juice, cake, biscuits, fruit, chocolates. I even tasted green apricots. So that was an experience. It was an amazing experience to see behind the scenes. I did get told off on my first day there for touching a carpet. So that was also interesting. To the two pictures there, the left-hand side one is the statue of Anahit, which is normally in the British Museum and was being returned to Armenia for the first time since it was taken many years ago. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for the exhibition, but I took part in proofreading the catalogue for that exhibition. And if you do get a chance to look at it, the story of how the head and hand got to the British Museum is really interesting. It's worthy of Indiana Jones or something like that. And on the right-hand side, I've got that picture there to show how welcoming the museum is. This was Vardavar this year. This poor dog was outside and was fed up of all the water and decided to take refuge in the museum, which I think is fantastic. The next placement I was involved in was with the European Institute of International Languages. Interestingly, before I went to Armenia, I'd never taught English before. I was a French teacher and later business studies teacher. So it was a very interesting experience, and I had to learn quite a lot on the job. I enjoyed being classroom assistant, so the teacher did the teaching, and then I'd be dragged in to perhaps talk about cultural aspect of the UK or something like that, and maybe do a role play with students. And I think one of the great things that happened to me while I was in Armenia is I rediscovered a love of teaching, something which towards the end of my teaching career, I feel I lost. The last placement I'm going to talk about was with something called Team Time. And if any of you have seen the blog I wrote for AVC, you'll know that when I started with Team Time, I had no idea what I was doing. Essentially, I was there as a native speaker to stimulate discussion. We were supposed to steer clear of controversial subjects, e.g. politics, religion and sex. But I soon found out there is no such thing in Armenia as an uncontroversial subject. And just throw in a few Russians, see if you can guess who the Russians are in that picture. But working with them, I realized how much I enjoy facilitating, even when it gets a bit hairy, a bit lively, a bit edgy. And one of the great things about this, and I think it's true to say on my other placements, is I was encouraged enormously to innovate. And I tried things which I would not probably have dared to do in the classroom in the UK. I did one exercise, for example, where people were in pairs and they had to have a discussion, but everything they said had to be a question. And that was really interesting. Really hard. I thought it was terrible, but they all told me they absolutely loved it. So I wasn't very good critic myself. Oh yeah, I mentioned here 7 p.m. until whenever. Punctuality is an interesting concept in Armenia. I used to rush there for 7 p.m. Nobody else did. It never started at 7. And although I think I was supposed to finish at 9, 9 never did. So I think, again, talked about flexibility earlier, that applies to timing as well. You need to be prepared to stay a lot longer than you perhaps anticipated. But I'm not complaining about that. Irina mentioned earlier on excursions. If I have one regret, it was that I was working the first 3 weekends I was there, and as a result, I couldn't go on the excursions. And that meant not meeting many other volunteers. So I would strongly recommend get on the excursions. It gives you a chance to explore the country and the culture. These trips are heavily subsidized and they feed you very well. You get to meet people, you get to meet other volunteers, and you get to meet people in a lot of the places you go to. This little bunch I photographed on the bottom of the picture. Second from the right is Cesar, I think from Chile, but Irina will correct me. He's not at all Armenian, but he went to Armenia to learn to play the duduk, which I think is an incredible thing to do. And last thing I heard, he's doing extremely well. The 2 young women are sisters, and they were the first volunteers from Venezuela. They were doing Birthright. I'm sorry, I don't remember the guy on the left's name. I only met him that day. And this isn't actually excursion, this is wine days. So if you like your wine, go to Armenia in the first week of June when the wine days take place in Yerevan. They shut off a big part of the street, and it's a really amazing experience, very upbeat and jolly. Irina referred to accommodation, sort of homestay versus private renting. I did both, and I would recommend that. So I spent my first 4 weeks with a host family. They'd actually been hosting for 20 years, I think. And I loved them. I had a lovely time there. But when you're my age, sort of just having your own room and then everything else is shared, it was a struggle at times. And I used to make an effort and go every evening and watch some Armenian television, of which I understood very little. And I would be given tea or coffee and lots of chocolates. And it was great. But I did also enjoy having the privacy of my own flat for a little while. That was my little kitchen there. I enjoy cooking, and you would never be allowed, I suspect, to cook in your homestay, and my host mum would not have allowed it. That was not a possibility. I should also mention that, I think Marina's already mentioned it, hospitality. hospitality is a massive thing in Armenia, but there are times where you do want to say no, and it's quite difficult. And I think it's something you have to manage. And it's obviously much easier if you find yourself in a private accommodation in order to do that. Lastly, then I've referring to Armenian language lessons, which Irina mentioned earlier. One of the great benefits of being a volunteer with AVC or Birthright is you get 2 free lessons a week. I enjoy them thoroughly. It's also a great way of meeting other volunteers and interacting. The teachers were great. I really got on very, very well with the teachers. But I should mention that, of course, if you wanted to do lessons before you go there, I did lessons with the Armenian Institute for 4 years, which again, I thoroughly enjoyed. Because I've exhausted those lessons, there is nowhere else to go. I'm now doing lessons with the Armenian Virtual College, which is, I should have put Agbu, that's part of Agbu. There's also an app called IOLingo, which I'm surprised Irina did not mention, which is AVC produced, I believe. And if you're looking for a one-to-one teacher, then italki is quite a good place to go. Can I stop sharing? No.
Thank you, Rod.
Oh.
Thank you. That's it's so wonderful to kind of you the way you were talking about it, and it kind of makes me miss Armenia right now. But I actually want to ask both of you just a little bit about how, and Rod, you sort of alluded to this a little bit, which is that you've lost your passion for teaching, and I think that you're not alone in that. I know my friend who's much younger than you, and she's a teacher, and she's quite frustrated with the system. But the fact that going to Armenia helped sort of change that, I think is, would you say that doing a program like AVC is a great way to kind of take a step back from your everyday life to sort of help re-inspire you by going somewhere else? Would you find that it did that for you?
Definitely, and I could probably speak on behalf of other AVC people, some of whom were, as I say, not Armenian at all, and they had a break from work, and I think they would talk about recharging their batteries. It definitely had that sort of impact. I mean, I've been retired for quite a long time from school teaching, and then I was teaching at the university here in Norwich. I was teaching French, and I stopped teaching last year. And after doing AVC, I want to be busier. I want to do more, which is one of the reasons why I continue to work with the school in Sevan and with the History Museum. So I should have said with the History Museum, they were sending me texts while I was on holiday in France to proofread. But I was happy to do that. I felt good about doing that. Yeah.
And Irina, just in terms of internships, I mean, in terms of qualifications, because Rod mentioned about CVs and so on, I mean, you don't have to be a professional to do AVC, and you can find placements for anyone at any sort of education level.
Exactly. The minimum requirement from our end is, one must hold a high school degree. We do have, there are certain additional qualifications. Let's assume, for example, we have sort of a medical corps. We have a couple of partner organizations that support specific initiatives that require doctors to come. So when we do have doctors that are coming through AVC and we're matching them with those placements, then we are working with the Ministry of Health and ensuring that their documentation is in place so that they're allowed to be able to practice and to be able to support in those types of areas. But for the most part, just the high school degree and, a passion and an interest to help, that's really what we're looking for. And then through the AVC was founded in 2000 with the first set of volunteers coming in 2001, a very small handful of volunteers. I came in year 2. Since that time, we become a very trusted organization in terms of securing volunteers and placing them with these organizations. So they actually, you know, they'll call us, you know, hey, we have this XYZ need. Is there any way that you can find us someone? And we have very, very high level professionals, and we have people who are just starting out in their careers. So we're able to balance all of those things and you know, support our partners and also support our volunteers in giving them the experience that they're seeking.
Well, we'll be sharing, I think, your presentation after the session with all the people that registered, but I saw the list of organization, and it really ranges. It's very wide. It's tech, it's you know, government institutions, it's private museums and so on, and medical and so on. So that's that's wonderful to hear. The other thing is that and I'm just curious about this because, you know, some of us do think about, we imagine it, but obviously your daily life is the reality of the world you live in sometimes stops you from kind of doing the kinds of, you know, these types of opportunities. Can I ask you both to just share very briefly what it was that made you, how did you find AVC, and what made you think this is the right thing for me?
Right. Well, I came to ABC via my daughters. Two of my daughters. Oops. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, sorry. Two of my daughters did Birthright, and unfortunately, I can't remember how they heard about Birthright. My youngest did it in 2012. My oldest in 2019, and I went to visit her in 2019, and I went with her to the offices, which are shared Birthright ABC, and I met Irina's predecessor, and she said, well, you should do it. And I said, well, what have I got to offer? You know, there's all these people doing, you know, with medical skills and so on. She said, well, you could teach English. And I thought, I don't want to teach English, but I knew that I'd go there in some way. I first went to Armenia 20 years ago, when as a present to myself for my 50th birthday. And I went as a tourist, and I knew I wanted to go back, but life kind of got in the way, work and family and so on. At the timing, it was everything to do with my mother. My mother was getting older. I didn't feel I could go to Armenia while she was getting really old. She lived to be 100 in 2023, and also died shortly afterwards. And we'd always had that discussion. She said, well, you can go when I die, which is very Armenian, I think. And that's exactly what I did.
Irina?
So when I went to ABC, I had just graduated college, and back then Birthright Armenia didn't exist. So had Birthright Armenia existed, I would have gone through that program because it was meant for the diasporans between the ages of 21 to 32. But it was really meant for me, you know, before entering the corporate world in America, to go and experience. And I very quickly understood that the impact I could have in this tiny little country is so much more significant than anything I could ever do in the US. And I think as much as Armenia has become much more globalized and we have so many more people here, I still firmly believe in that people, if they give the country a chance, if they're flexible, something that Rod mentioned, you know, they can actually achieve quite a lot in this tiny country and impact people's lives. And you know, there's a lot of crap that's happening around the world, and when you're able to do even a little bit of good, I always say take that opportunity. So, and I found out about ABC through my brother, who had done a 3-month internship randomly. So that was the one good thing my brother did for me.
And I just want to say that there's an expression, we have an expression in Greek called Armenian Diskepsi, when it's related to Armenian time, and it is a real thing. I just want to put it out there to the non-Armenians out there. But I want to open this up to some of the other, to our audience, and see if anybody's got specific questions for Irina about the program itself. Feel free to raise your hand and or put your questions in the chat, and we will obviously share some the materials with you afterwards as well, but don't all jump at once. While we're waiting for some questions to come through, I think the other thing is, because you'd mentioned about timings and how a lot of people end up regretting not doing longer. And I think I met Vonnie briefly while she was interning, and she's another retiree who sort of used her expertise to come in, and she was doing some great internship. What would be, do you have a benchmark of what is the sort of the most ideal internship period?
So I think for our senior corps, and also even for our professional corps, I would maybe move away from even calling it an internship to our enabling people to do consultations, right? They're consulting in their expertise. In terms of ideal time, that's a great question. You know, sometimes, especially Armenia has had a very, very tragic history in the past, decade has been extremely difficult. We had a, pretty significant high in 2018. Everyone had a lot of, significant hopes about what sort of Armenia was becoming. And then 2020, 2023. So it's been a very difficult period for a lot of the Armenians here. With that in mind, I think the luxury of, making sure the weather is good and things like that, I think for those in the diaspora, come when you can, because the country and the organizations and the people, they really do benefit from your being here. But I do think, with Vonnie here and with some of our other senior volunteers, I think summer is always a really hard time to be in Armenia because it gets dreadfully hot. And with that heat, especially a lot of homes don't have air conditioning and things like that. It can be very, very difficult for certain people. And then winter, same thing. It can get extremely, extremely cold. Some apartments are not as heated as we're used to. Streets are not plowed. I remember when I first moved to Armenia, I saw women wearing stiletto heels in the snow, and I was like, how do you guys not have broken limbs? And their response was, we need the stiletto to literally dig into the ice so that we don't fall. And I was like, well, that would not be me. So, maybe avoiding, if there are people who are averse to very cold or very hot weathers, then, probably spring or fall are the best times to come. But we accept volunteers year round. As long as people apply about 1 month in advance, we're able to really prep and get everything ready in time.
And probably to stay for at least a month so that they really so that they can really sort of get stuck in.
I mean, so I've had a lot of my older volunteers, and when I say older, 40 plus, they've started with their first experience, committing a month. And then every time they've come thereafter, they've tried to spend more and more time. Each person, like Rod mentioned, like everyone has sort of their own family and they have their own life, and so everyone knows how much time they are able to commit and they are able to share. We would love to use and abuse your knowledge, your time, your experience for the benefit of this country. That there is just a small burden of please apply, because that application will help us fully customize the best possible experience for you. And then you will join what we call the ABC family to hopefully make impact long-term for the country.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Are there questions from the audience?
We're just so good at what we do. No one has questions, Rod. We should be happy.
I know.
Well, I know there's lots of things I forgot to mention, so I don't know. It came up a moment ago. I think it's important that it's great to use your expertise, but also I think it's really good to get out of your comfort zone. So for me, doing proofreading, something I've never done, and sometimes I think, this is terrible, what if I'm making mistakes here? But the point was that whatever was being produced was better than there would have been otherwise. And I think that's worth, that's worth keeping in mind.
There's a question here from Sarush. Do you accept volunteering online, or do they have to be in Armenia?
So unfortunately, remote volunteering is not an option. It was something that we tried out. So everyone say hi to Alex, who should be sleeping.
Hello,
I'm a great Armenian mother. We don't sleep until midnight. But yeah, so outside of COVID, we've never done remote volunteering. So it will have to be, you will have to be able to commit and come to Armenia. One quick thing. So Rod's modesty. So we are about to go do a photo shoot at the History Museum to take photos of things that have been inscribed in the walls of the History Museum that Rod literally proofread and confirmed. So your writing is on the wall, Rod, or is it? So I'm really excited about seeing some of that.
I wish you were. I mean,
Sorry, go ahead, Rod.
I was going to say that in my presentation, I was going to try and put a video. I've got a video of the laser printer printing stuff on the walls that I'd proofread. And I just couldn't look at it because I was terrified that there will be mistakes. Just don't tell me, Arena.
When I go back, I'll have a look and let you know.
Tatiana will tell you, I won't.
I'm sure.
But I think also, I think to your point, Arena, though, that this is incredibly important because it's worth remembering as well that Armenians, English isn't one of the first languages of Armenia. The first language will be Armenian. Then it was also Russian, given its Soviet history. There will be other languages as well. There's been a huge influx of Syrian Armenians since the war. And so you've got the Arabic, you've got the Iranian Armenians who have been migrating slowly over the last few decades as well. So that English level, and with the increase of tourism, all of these things, are really, really useful to the local population, making sure that the museums are well curated for the tourists. Like, that's so incredibly important, and it's something that me myself, as someone who doesn't read Armenian, it's so important to be able to go into a museum and be able to read the descriptions and know that what I'm reading is exactly as what it's been written in Armenian or in a French or whatever other languages there are. So, Rod, your work is very much, I think it's very important.
Well, interestingly, 20 years ago, there was nothing in English. I went to the History Museum 20 years ago. There was not a word in English.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time to present to us AVC. And I really, hope that it inspires others from the UK to take this opportunity, myself included, although I already go to Armenia quite a bit and volunteer quite a bit myself. But I think being able to sort of contribute in such a positive way, and also the impact that it has on your broader experience and your daily life, I think is something that it makes it truly worthwhile. If there are questions for Arena, please feel free to email us or contact, if you haven't shared your email with Arena already, feel free to message us and we'll connect you to her for more information about AVC. And I want to say thank you to Rod and Arena for taking the time to talk to us about AVC.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to provide our event feedback form. If you've got any questions, if you've got any feedback for the today's session, please share it with us. And of course, also please do remember to donate to us. Armenian Institute is a UK charity, and we rely heavily on donations to run the projects that we run here. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our future events.
Thank you.